I'm Michaela Bendiksen from Refugees Welcome, and I do this introduction to the Danish asylum system every month in this house, but it's usually a little longer version with more details. But today we don't want to get too tired because we have to do some discussion and ask some questions afterwards. So I'll just make this very short version this time. I'll just explain to you how the Danish asylum system in Denmark works, basically. There's 3 different ways of getting asylum right now in Denmark, according to the law, the Alien Act. The 3 paragraphs are called 7.1, 7.2 and 7.3. 7.1 is like the classic definition of a refugee according to the convention, the Refugee Convention that you know, where the definition of a refugee was written in 1951, and it's still the same definition that every country uses to assess who is a refugee and who is not. So in the Danish Alien Act, it's Article 7.1, which covers the convention status. It's also called K status for convention in Denmark. And if you get that, you will get a blue passport, and you will get 5 years of temporary residence in the first place usually. Examples of that could be a political activist from Iran who was a member of a political group and was tortured in prison. That's a very classic asylum case. It could also be a homosexual man from Uganda. It could be a female doctor from Afghanistan whose husband was kidnapped by the Taliban, and her parents were threatened because of her work. It would be a young man from Syria fleeing from military service during the war here. And it could be a woman from Eritrea escaping from national service and leaving the country illegally. All those people would be convention refugees. But there's also other ways of getting asylum. If you don't live up to this specific definition, if there's a risk that you will be exposed to some kind of inhuman, degrading treatment or facing death sentence, you can get a protection status called B status in Denmark. And that refers to a number of conventions where these things are mentioned. The European Convention on Human Rights and the World Declaration on Human Rights and the UN Convention Against Torture. They all mention this problem, this situation. So Denmark is obliged to protect people from this situation. And also there's a principle called non-refoulement, which means that nobody could be or should be returned to a country that could send this person to a country where this would happen. So if it's a third country which is in question, it's also illegal. If you get protection status, B status, it's called 7.2, and you will get a grey passport, fremmedpas på dansk. Examples of that could be a woman from Pakistan who was forced to marry a man and divorced him against the family's wishes, and the family had plans to kill her for that. It could also be a man from Iran who was accused of adultery because he had a sexual relationship to a married woman. They would both face death sentence in Iran. So these 2 cases would not be classic asylum persecution, but they would still face inhuman treatment. A new thing is the Danish Alien Act 7.3, which has just come into practice recently, and it's a weaker form of 7.2. It's pointed towards the Syrians right now. It's aimed at people who come from a general area of danger and conflict, and if they're not in any kind of individual concrete danger. So that could be a mother with a child coming from Syria, for instance, she would not be called in for military service, and she would not be in individual danger, but she would be in general danger. But this protection is very weak. It's only 1 year, time limited, and it gives no access to family reunification the first year. So that's a very bad situation that we had this new law. Luckily, it affects very few people. It's only 4% of asylum seekers who get this 7.3, so it's around 60 people by now who got this. Yeah, next one. Something very much in the media right now is how people are coming to Denmark. So this is a map of the main escape routes for refugees from their countries and into Europe. And the area where people are drowning right now is this one outside of Libya before they reach Italy. And of course, people are also drowning off the coast of Egypt and Spain and between Greece and Turkey, but not that many. But you can see it's a complex network of routes, also across the deserts, very dangerous routes. Right now, what we discuss most are the routes from Syria through Turkey or through Egypt, one way or the other, and from Eritrea and south of Africa up through Libya and Sudan first, and then Libya, and then across the sea. That's the main routes right now. And of course, it takes a lot of money to take this road, because everybody needs to pay a smuggler to enter Europe, because it's not possible to enter without a valid visa and a passport. So that takes assistance from smugglers who, of course, make a lot of money on it. So recently I asked some of you people how much you paid to get here, and the answer was 10 people answered, and it was between 50,000 and 110,000 Danish kroner to get here, and anything from 1 month to 6 months. Yeah. So next one. So how do you establish who is a refugee and who is not a refugee? We have the definition in the Refugee Convention, but it's up to every national country to find out who is a refugee, who lives up to this definition and who doesn't. And of course that's really difficult. Every country has its own way of doing that. And there's no real, international system to make these assessments. The only international organization who deals with this is the UNHCR, the Refugee High Commissioner. They make some recommendations and interpretations, guidelines of how to make this assessment, but it's not necessary for anybody to follow it. It's voluntary for a national state if they want to do what the UNHCR recommends or not. So of course it's very different how the national states react to this, and actually very few countries follow the advice of the UNHCR. But to try to find out who is in danger and who is a refugee, you have to talk to the person, of course. There has to be some kind of interview, and there would usually be a kind of form filling, and they should produce the documents that they have, if they have any documents. They could all be relevant to the case. And then to make the decision, there would usually be some kind of court hearing in all states. The documents that could be relevant for an asylum seeker is anything that can establish the identity of the person. Who are you and where do you come from? When were you born? Where are you a citizen? That's the most important thing. So birth certificates and anything to do with your life and your background, like job contracts, cards for your children, marriage certificates could be relevant, but also things that has to do with your threat, the reason why you ask asylum. That could be newspaper articles or written threats that you have received. It could be court order from your own country. It could be membership cards from political organizations or religious groups. But all this is not really needed to get asylum. It's a good thing to have. It will strengthen your case, but it's not really necessary. Many people get asylum without a single piece of paper. So to try to find out if this person needs protection, there is two basic things that has to be in place, both of them. The credibility and the risk. The credibility is about the identity of the person. Who is this person? Is he the one that he claims to be? Because it's not always that people tell the truth. And the story that this person tells, is it consistent and convincing? Does it seem self-experienced? And is it a realistic situation that somebody has heard about before or could happen? So that's the individual and the personal aspects of the case. But then there's also the general part of the case, which has to do with the situation in the country where the person comes from. So there's a lot of background information on most asylum situations, because national governments and also international groups write a lot of reports about what's going on in the world. So they're trying to always establish what is the threat, what is the situation right now for different kinds of groups. It could be for a minority group in a special area. They try to ask people in that area, and they follow the news in that area to try to find out how it is to treatment in their own country. And it's very, very limited. Only a few people get that every year. It's handled by the Ministry of Justice. But for all the people who get positive, which is fortunately the vast majority right now, they will get to a commune, municipality, and they will get a 3 years integration program. They can't choose which commune to go to, which municipality to go to, unfortunately, but they can wish where they want to go if they have family members, or if they have a school they would like to attend or something. They can try to argue why they want to go someplace. But most of the area around Copenhagen is very difficult to get to. And some people just have to go wherever they put them. They try to collect people in small groups so that you will not be alone in a municipality, but it also happens. And within the first 3 years you can't move out of your municipality usually. The active phase, while all the decisions are being made, is called phase 2. And then you move to a residence camp, and you will get pocket money, and you will get access to internship or language training, both. And if you're still in the system after 6 months with no decision, you have the right to apply for work and to move out of the camps. But it's a very tough procedure, because Immigration Service has to approve of the job contract and the place you want to live. So it's a slow procedure, and most people get turned down. So it doesn't really work as we had hoped. Very few people have a job, and very few people live outside the camps, unfortunately. Phase 3 is a place where you only go if you get negative. If you get a final negative, you will get to phase 3. And the people who get in phase 3 now are moved to a special deportation camp called Sjælsmark, which is run by the organization in Denmark that runs the prisons. So it's not a very nice camp. It's much more like an open prison than a normal asylum camp. You will get no pocket money, you will get no access to internship or study or work, and you face the risk of going to closed camp, to the prison, and you will have weekly meetings with the police. But all this is only if you don't cooperate about voluntary return. If you do that, and if the police believes that you mean this seriously, then you will stay in a situation more like phase 2. There's one exception, and that's families with children who are still in the system 12 months after a final rejection. They will have access to move out of the camps because of the children. to make sure the children don't get more sick than necessary. But the parents are not able to work or to go to praktik or make money or anything, so it's not a normal life anyway. It's only a little bit better than living in the camps. These are some of the numbers. I'll not go through all of them, but the important ones is that in 2014, 14,800 people applied for asylum in Denmark, but many of them had Dublin cases, so only 10,000 cases were actually handled in Denmark. And out of these, 6,000 got asylum. In 2015, so far, it's almost exactly the same amount as the people who came for the first 3 months of 2014. But we'll see, because the figure is usually rising over the summer, so I think it might be higher this summer, or I'm quite sure it will be higher this summer also, like it was last summer. The majority are from Syria, of course. Number 2 is Eritrea, but they stopped coming in the autumn, so it's still the people who came last summer who are on that list. There's not very many new people coming from Eritrea yet. Some of the stateless people are actually from Syria, but regarded as stateless still. And then you have Somalians, Russians, and not so many Afghans anymore, and not so many Iraqis anymore, as we used to have. For many years, Afghanistan was the top country on that list in Denmark. The number of unaccompanied minors, children who as was compared to 2013, 838 children came alone, and they come from Syria and Eritrea too, like the other ones. Yeah, and maybe just go back one step, just to compare with Sweden, because we feel so sorry for ourselves in Denmark that when we can't handle all these refugees. We just have to remember how things are in Sweden all the time. Because if you compare to Sweden in 2014, they gave positive to 31,000 and Denmark gave to 6,000. So maybe it could be possible to handle a little more in Denmark, I think so. I'll not go through this because it's really technical and difficult to explain, but the interesting thing is that the percentage of recognition, meaning the people who got positive in immigration service, first instance, was last year 74%, and until now, in 2015, it's 91%. That's extreme. It's never been anything like this. When I started working with refugees, it was like 10%, 18%, something like that every year. So it's really a lot of people who get positive now. That's good. And then you have the refugee board coming on top of that, where they change around 1/3 of all decisions. So it's actually more than 91%. Yeah. One back. That one, yeah. This is the recommendations that we have in my organization. Maybe it's a little bit difficult to read them, they're small. And that's what we're going to discuss now. So I'm not going through them, we can just leave them there for inspiration. And Kipanga, I think you have some system of how to start the debate? Yeah. We see. Yeah, okay. But thanks for this.
we start the debate, and then you have another microphone going all around. You have to take it and say what you think should be changed, and then you send it to the government. Usually when you come to Denmark, you need a guide even a tourist. Even people who visit, they get tourists to show them the country where they are. But it's not often happening in the center. Or being have the experience, we start by saying about better counseling, that's what we need. Yeah, and then Mika will take over with record all the interviews. She will tell us the risk you get when you get bad translation during the interview. So we need record during the interview, the asylum process. Okay, welcome.
Okay, thank you. As he said, my name is Obin, and I come from Burkina Faso. In the debate, we said that it's necessary to have a better counseling for asylum seekers because when you arrive in a country, you always need somebody to show you the way. And people going to asylum generally don't know anything about asylum. They don't know what the system is. So they jump into the asylum and they struggle on their way. And finally they get rejected simply because they didn't know what to do and what to say. Even though their story is true, when you don't really know what it is, you can really miss the asylum. And I said, I have personally been the case because I had come to Denmark with the idea that I'm coming to a country where I personally being a human rights activist, and I'm coming here and it's a human rights country where they will just accept me as a civil servant who is fleeing criminal treatment in my own country. And when I arrived, when I started the asylum case, I found that it's something different, simply because I didn't know really what to say and what I should get prepared to before the interviews, before the court, and everything. So I think this is really a bad luck, and I know I'm not the only one who has been in this case, and maybe many people have also lost this asylum acceptance because they didn't know anything about what is the asylum process, what documentation and information they should provide to the asylum authorities, the immigration authorities. So we think that counseling newcomers, counseling those who have just started asylum is very important, and we wish that immigration service through the police and other staff at the welcome centers should really give enough information to the asylum seekers so that they really make a clear statement of what has brought them to ask for asylum, and in case really they don't deserve asylum and they are rejected, they can really be happy for having at least told the truth, even though they don't have this asylum. And that's why we have, we thought it's very important to mention this point, and we think that the authorities will take good measures to change the way people come and they proceed in the asylum cases. I don't know if it's enough. So the next point is,
If there's anyone who has a comment with that, he can come up and take the microphone and say what happened during the counseling, or a question or anything. No one? That? Nice. Stand microphone.
Okay, I'm a reporter from New Times Magazine, and I would like to ask for my magazine and on behalf of asylum seekers too. First of all is how much can asylum seekers who are in the middle of process can try to challenge the asylum system in Denmark that seems to isolate asylum seekers from their niche community and lack of ability to get access to the knowledge and skills that you said. That is the first question. And second question is, if some asylum seekers are so outspoken about asylum system in Denmark, will it have negative or positive impact on the asylum cases or not? Because it seems so many asylum seekers are afraid to speak out when they feel they get treated unfairly about this. Thank you so much. Two questions.
Who should answer?
This is Nicola.
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah.
Okay. I can try to answer. I think there's a lot of options to try to change the system as we're doing now, and as this house has always been trying to do. I think the politicians can listen if we have good arguments and we speak seriously and with a united voice. I think they will listen to a certain extent. Especially some details have been changed along the years and been improved, so it's working. And I think it could never affect your own personal asylum case to speak out during the process. To make complaints or to go in the media about something would never affect your own personal case. Because the people who take the decisions, they don't interfere with, they don't listen to things like that. So everybody should feel secure and safe to speak their mind and to make complaints if something goes wrong. And also it doesn't affect your case to call the immigration service and ask why it's taking so long. Many people are afraid to do that, and it can never harm your case to do that, so just do it anyway. Yeah. So, what's the next step, Kimaga?
And then you can continue by telling us the risk people get when they go to interview and then they get back the translators.
Okay.
And then what could be the solution to about that?
Okay. One of the recommendations that we have had for many years is to take better care of the translation situation in the asylum process, because it's a very important part of the decision actually. It affects your case very much, how the translation has been done. Because the interviews, the personal interviews and meetings are the basic part of the asylum decision. And also what you write in your asylum form is translated by interpreters. So that's also really important, not only what you write, but also how it comes out. And the problem in the Danish system is that the interpreters are not educated. There's no demand for education for translators. So some of them are very, very good and professional and experienced, and some of them are extremely bad and don't know what they're doing. And you don't know which kind of translator you will get. And also the choice between translators is sometimes made wrong, so that they don't pick the right language for you. In general, immigration service doesn't pay much attention to different languages. They think that Farsi and Dari is more or less the same. They think Kurdish is one language sometimes and not very, very different languages. And Arabic can also be very, very different from one country to another. where they just think Arabic is one language. So that can lead to a lot of misunderstandings and wrong interpretations in the case, and it can actually really harm the case and change the outcome. Usually it won't, because it's usually only details that is not very relevant and very important in the case. But in some cases it can have a big impact if there's a translation error. So to make sure that this doesn't happen, and also to make sure that the level of interpretation gets better, we recommend that all interviews are recorded digitally, which is very easy to do these days. And then you can go back to the sound file and check if there was any kind of mistake. You can get a second interpreter to check what was being said, if there's a discussion later on. And that would be very low cost and very easy to do, but for some reason they refuse to do it. It's been a wish from us and the lawyers for many, many years, and we don't really understand why they don't want to do it. Also, we think that there should be a basic education of all interpreters, because interpretation is not only about language but also about how to interpret, how to work. For professional translators working for the EU, for instance, in the EU Commission and the EU Parliament, they go through years of training in just how to translate, how to pick the right words, and how to translate neutrally and precisely what people are saying. So it's not so easy. It shouldn't be just to get the basic meaning of what people are saying. It should be exact translation. And that can only be done if people are trained in the art of interpretation, and nobody is actually right now. So we think there should be an education in all languages as much as it would be possible, and some kind of examination that people should go through before they could work as interpreters in this system. And the same goes actually for the criminal system. It's the same in the court system. If somebody is charged with some criminal offense in the Danish system and they don't speak Danish, they get the same interpreters without education. Some are really bad and some are really good, and you don't know which one you're going to get. So.
Question there in the back. Yeah. To begin translator for...
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Hi everybody, my name is Jalal. I live in Sandholm, but I have one question for Miguel. It is, it is many people is living in which name in Sandholm. So which name not sending back, not having deport. What happened about this? Why it is living? It's a long time. So I live in Sandholm 5 years. What happened about these people? I'm not sending back for my country. I don't have deport, and but I stay in Sandholm, only eating. You know that. Thanks.
Skal jeg også svare på det?
Ja, gør du bare
Okay. It's a big problem with people who stay many years in the camps. Fortunately, it's a very small number of people right now who get negative, so it's not going to be that many in the future as it has been. But the people who are here and waiting is still a problem. And people have been waiting up to 18 years right now as rejected asylum seekers. That's incredibly long time. There's many different reasons why people end up in this situation, so it's not a simple question, and there's not a simple solution to it. The easy way would of course be to say that after some time everybody gets positive. But then we would have many people misusing the asylum system, people who don't really need protection but just want to find work or move to another country. So, and that's not what the asylum system is made for. So that would be a problem at some point. There's many different reasons why people end up in that situation. It could be because of the country, their own country, that doesn't want to accept them for some reason. It could be because they're actually not telling the truth about their identity. In that case, there's no country who wants to acknowledge them because there's no proof of who they are. They don't really exist. And Denmark needs to have an acceptance from the home country before they can deport people. Which is a good thing, of course, that we can't just send people to wherever we want and dump them. We have to make sure that some country will accept them and receive them. And that's the problem. In Denmark, it's something that we see because people live in the asylum camps after they are rejected. But in many other countries like France and England, you just see them as homeless people and people underground living in the streets. Many of the people who live as homeless people in UK and France, for instance, are rejected asylum seekers, but they don't have access to the system anymore. They can't live in the accommodation camps anymore. So compared to that, the Danish situation is actually better. I don't want to defend a system where people live 18 years in a camp, because I think that's really inhumane. But still, compared to living in the streets without any kinds of help and support, it's still better. But it's difficult to make a very good solution for it. And the answer the politicians give always is that if somebody could just get positive, if they waited long enough, then everybody would just sit down and wait. They would just, if they had a bad asylum case, they would just come up with a false identity and they would just sit and wait until they got positive. And that's true, that could happen. So I don't really know how to solve it. But I think that there should be some kind of reopening system after a period, and there should also be some maximum time where you just have to acknowledge that Denmark has been trying for maybe 5 years to deport people, and it hasn't been possible. And at some point you just have to give up and say, okay, it's too bad, but now we have to give this person a life, because it's not fair to keep people in a situation like that forever, even if it might be their own fault. But still, it's I think it's not acceptable after some time, and especially with children. I think there's no excuse for taking these very, very long waiting times. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to ask you a little questions, like few questions about my country. People have been deported to my country and they have been rejected, and some they have took them to my country and they have passed through a lot torture and in the airport. And when they took me to my country, the policemen, they tortured them, they arrested them, they took their passports, they arrested me with my kid. Then after they brought me back here to Denmark, still they continued to deport me. After me, I come 2011, they deported one lady. She was living in Amsterdam from Congo. When they took him to Congo, she was violated. They left him in Congo. That case still here in Denmark, they know about it. Somebody helped her to go to Congo, Brazzaville. And until now, they are still deporting women in Congo. Which in European countries where they have stopped deporting women in Congo? Why only Denmark? They cannot listen to women who are coming from Congo. And another question is, why is it they put young kids in cross camp? The camp which you're saying, Senegal, is a new camp. But before they put people in cross camp with their kids. Where the kids, when they come from cross camp, they come depressed, they get stressed, they cannot sit in the class, they cannot do anything at home. What is the government doing about that? For the kids who don't have any citizenship, they don't have any place, they don't have any country. What is the country doing about that?
It's very easy to answer the last question because that's illegal, period. It's illegal to put children in prison in Denmark.
Okay.
So if you have cases of that, you should report it to the UN Committee of Torture, for instance, or to Amnesty or somebody who could make a report about it, because it shouldn't happen. Children have been in the closed camp for short periods in connection to deportation sometimes, I know that, but they shouldn't be staying there at all.